in Northern California, right in the middle of wine country. We're probably 200 feet from these flames, and they're just, oh my God, flaring up right through this valley. And in many areas, there's still 0% containment.
Winds just came out of the north at howling speeds. When you have that combination of high winds and very dry fuel, it just becomes explosive.
To what extent do you attribute these wildfires and how quickly they're spreading to climate change?
It's not unusual for us to see these kinds of events, but it seems to be getting worse and more frequent. Fires are different now than they were 20, 30 years ago. You simply can't look at statistics like that and ignore it. This is the new normal.
Last year's massive fires in Northern California killed 44 people, leveled thousands of homes, and burned through more than 200,000 acres of land. The inferno struck at the heart of California's wine industry, a major enterprise here. Dozens of wineries in Napa and Sonoma counties were devastated.
It was about 10:45, and my wife was staying here, and she saw on the hillside flames, basically this whole hillside on fire. The vineyard team grabbed some hoses and did what they could,
Wow.
but it was just not enough. We've had fires in the area before, but not like this. Got people that have been with me for 20, 30 years, and they're as devastated as, obviously, as I am, and, this was their life.
But worsening wildfires are just one concern for California's premium wine production. As climate change escalates over the next 30 years, California is expected to see a 70% decline in area currently suitable for viticulture.
Wine, of course, is probably the most expensive crop in the entire world, and it's a crop that is very, very sensitive to climate.
NASA scientist Dr. Ben Cook studies the impact of climate change on agriculture. He says that these environmental consequences have global repercussions today. So with regards to wine regions, where is the changing climate most evident?
Pretty much every single wine growing region in the world, we're seeing some impact of climate change. The old world regions like France, Italy, Spain, they've been growing grapes and making wine for hundreds of years. And it's really important because this provides us a really long-term perspective. If things are changing and it's still where things have been for the last several centuries, maybe, things are okay. But what we're seeing in a lot of these areas is that we're starting to move outside what we call the envelope of natural variability. We're starting to move into kind of new world relative to the last several centuries. And I think it also kind of highlights how extreme some of these climate changes are.
Wine is very important to a lot of people, but we could survive without wine.
I don't know that I agree with that. Survival is not physical survival, it's also cultural survival. France, so much of their kind of cultural identity is wrapped up in kind of their view of wine.
To see how vintners today are reconciling with the changing climate, we went to France's most prominent and profitable wine region. Bordeaux pumps out more than 700 million bottles each year. Its prestige stems largely from its optimal environment and temperate climate, and the region's history, culture, and economy depend on it.
On va prendre 2 verres de rouge, s'il vous plaît. Cheers.
Bernard Farget is the vice president of the trade group that represents all Bordeaux winemakers.
You like it?
Nice.
C'est un très beau vin.
How has the changing climate affected the wine industry here?
Il y a 30 ans, nous vendangions 2 à 3 semaines plus tard qu'aujourd'hui. Et ça, c'est directement lié au changement climatique. Nos craintes sont des événements climatiques très durs, des sécheresses fortes. C'est évidemment dans le scénario très inquiétant. Mais c'est tout à fait possible.
What are your concerns for the economics of wine in coming years?
Si on se met dans un scénario catastrophe climatique, ça devient un scénario catastrophe économiquement. C'est évident. Le chiffre d'affaires du vin de Bordeaux, c'est 4 milliards d'euros sur une année normale. C'est aussi le premier employeur de main-d'œuvre de la région.
As a region, how much production did Bordeaux lose this past season?
Nous ne savons pas encore exactement. Mais nous pensons que nous avons perdu entre 40 et 50% de la récolte. Il y a des propriétés qui ont perdu parfois 80 à 90%. C'est très brutal pour les entreprises qui ont eu 90% de pertes. Certaines des entreprises ont peu de stock, ont parfois peu de réserves financières. Donc nous sommes très inquiets pour celles-ci.
Many of the vineyards in Bordeaux have been producing wine for generations, and families have depended on the crop for hundreds of years.
Et quand mon grand-père a racheté la propriété de Bossé-Jourbécaux, il s'est aperçu que nous avions 7 hectares de carrières creusées dans le calcaire sous notre vignoble.
Wow. Juliette Bécaud oversees 50 acres of mainly Merlot grapes at her family's Château Bossé-Jourbécaux.
How many bottles of wine do you have down here?
On a à peu près ici l'équivalent d'une récolte. Et justement, si on a l'équivalent d'une récolte, c'est à cause des excès climatiques pour pouvoir continuer à vendre du vin si on n'a plus de récolte. Donc les racines de la vigne, parce que la vigne est plantée au-dessus de cette carrière, ces racines descendent à plus de 7 mètres de profondeur dans la roche pour venir chercher la fraîcheur et l'eau dont la vigne a besoin. At the beginning of August, the roots came at this level.
Like
here.
2 feet down?
Yes, because the weather was very dry and hot. Nous avons de plus en plus d'excès et au mois de juin, on a passé presque plus de 10 jours à plus de 30 degrés et certains jours, on était à 38 degrés. C'est vrai qu'autrefois, nous n'avions pas ce genre d'excès. On a toujours eu des étés chauds à Bordeaux, mais pas avec des températures aussi élevées.
But it's not just extreme heat threatening France's vital export. Last spring, the region was gutted by freezing temperatures. Wine growers scrambled to protect their crops, but for many, there was little that could be done to salvage the harvest.
What percentage of your yield did you lose this year?
Donc pour nous, c'est une perte très importante, c'est-à-dire c'est une perte de plus de 80% d'une récolte normale. C'est 100 000 bouteilles qui sont parties dans une espace de quelques minutes. Cette parcelle a été vendangée, mais il n'y avait pas de raisin. Et le matin même de la gelée, nos employés étaient dans la vigne et ils avaient les larmes aux yeux de voir que notre vigne était totalement détruite par le gel.
As the climate shifts, the future of all agriculture is in question. When it comes to Bordeaux, certain varieties of grape are all but doomed.
The industry here is sort of in crisis mode. Varieties that we see on wine bottles in every grocery store, Merlot being a good example, may not exist in 30 years, at least in Bordeaux. And so scientists are growing different varieties to see what will work in warming temperatures.
Kees van Leuven, a scientist and winemaker, is taking grape varieties from all over the world into the lab to see what might survive Bordeaux's oncoming climate changes.
With climate change, ripening is happening more and more early in the season. And Merlot, with harvest happening more and more early, maybe in 20 or 30 years' time, will not be longer well adapted to the Bordeaux climate. So we have to find then new varieties which can replace Merlot. We take grape samples every week, have them analyzed to see the composition of the grapes, and we model the ripening of the grapes to see how they react to temperature. And we look for varieties which are later ripening, but still very good quality and with a typicity which is very similar to what we have in Bordeaux wines today. This is Touriga Nacional, a very famous grape from the Douro region. In terms of aromatic complexity, it comes very close to Bordeaux wine, so we have a lot of hope on this variety. Prunelard was a very old variety which was no longer used because it used to have difficulties in reaching full ripeness, but now with changing climate it might become interesting.
It's the perfect climate change grape.
Yeah. If we don't adapt, then Bordeaux is really endangered.
Like many distressed enterprises, the wine industry is looking to technology for these solutions. Back in California, geneticist Dr. Dario Cantu is tackling this crisis at the molecular level. He's extracting DNA from grapevines, choosing ideal traits, and then breeding genetically superior strains of popular wines, like Cabernet Sauvignon.
The ultimate goal of what we do, which we call molecular viticulture, is to be able to control at very fine scale what happens in the berries during the process of ripening and before we harvest them. I believe that genetics is the key for the future of viticulture. By improving genotypes, we'll be able to grow better adapted varieties.
What elements are you trying to preserve, say for the most popular varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon or Pinot Noir?
So what my research is trying actually to obtain is an understanding of the genetic basis of Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Noir, and other varieties, so that we can mix them with other traits like drought tolerance, pest resistance, so that those characteristics of Cabernet Sauvignon are preserved when they're grown in conditions that are not optimal.
As more industries feel the impact of a warming climate, how we address this problem today could influence the future of all agriculture. Obviously, your focus right now is on wine, but is there sort of a bigger picture application to this in agriculture?
There are other industries as large as the wine grape industry that will face the same issues. Think about chocolate, think about coffee. So what we learn in terms of adaptability and improvement for grapes can be applied to other crops. Being climate change responsive is to be able to have the best genetic material for every region in the world. We need to cultivate the best adapted varieties to a certain climate, and that's clear. The sooner we realize that there is a problem, the sooner we will have a solution, and there are solutions.